In this first lesson, I really want to communicate what is going on in the world and why it is imperative for us to wake up, both as individuals as well as a collective, as society. There is a global crisis that is occurring, and this is probably not news to you, but I want to just paint a picture of what's going on by sharing some of the facts of our global situation and showing how these are all directly related to our consciousness, both as a collective, as humanity, as well as individually, because humanity is essentially a collective of individual human beings, and the way that we are acting as humanity is a reflection of how we are behaving as individual human beings. And it is our consciousness which shapes our behavior. So fundamentally, the root cause of the global problems that we face are a reflection of our level of consciousness as human beings. So this lesson, I really want to convey this message. And again, it's probably something that you're already aware of, but I think to kind of lay out some of these facts and to paint a picture of what's going on can really help us to better understand our global situation and our ability to influence it, our ability to change what's going on in the world by changing what is going on within ourselves. So that's what we're going to explore in this lesson, is what's going on in the world and how it is a reflection of our consciousness, and therefore how we can transform the world by transforming our consciousness. So there are a lot of problems in the world that we are facing today. There is ecological destruction, environmental destruction and pollution. There's economic displacement, people being challenged financially, not being able to afford their basic needs in our economy. There's social inequality, individuals and groups that are mistreated, that are abused, that experience injustices. There's political corruption, the abuse of power in government and in different sectors of society that relate to government and politics. There's violence and hatred between people. There is war and conflict between nations. There's epidemics of disease and ill health, and there is an alarming amount of people that struggle with their mental well-being, that experience significant amounts of stress and unhappiness. All of these problems that we face in the world, the major problems that we face, while they seem to be diverse and are existing in different sectors of society, they are ultimately all the result of human behavior. And human behavior is a reflection of human consciousness. So scientists say that we are now in the Earth's 6th mass extinction event, and unlike the other 5, this one is primarily caused by human behavior. So there have been, in Earth's history, at least according to what we know or to what science theorizes, there have been 5 mass extinction events, the most recent being the extinction of the dinosaurs with the giant meteor that struck the Earth. But there have been other mass extinction events in the past, and a mass extinction event is defined as rapid environmental changes that dramatically affect global biodiversity, leading to the extinction of a significant proportion of species during each period. So according to the data, we are currently now in the Earth's 6th mass extinction event, and unlike all of the other ones, this one is primarily caused by our behavior. It's caused by the way that we as human beings are currently living on the planet, the way that we are relating to nature, the way that we are polluting and destroying nature and natural ecosystems, and the way that we are living on the Earth is rapidly destroying natural ecosystems and leading to the extinction of a significant proportion of species. So the current rate of species extinction is estimated to be 1,000 to 10,000 times higher than the natural extinction rate. So as an example, if there were if we're saying there are 2 million species, or rather 100 million species, then 10,000 to 100,000 of these are going extinct each year. So the population decline that we're facing, wildlife populations have declined by an average of 69% between 1970 and 2018. Around 15 billion trees are cut down each year, and this large-scale deforestation is contributing significantly to habitat loss and to climate change. And a lot of deforestation occurs because of harvesting the resources of the forest, primarily wood, but they're also cleared for agriculture. There's a significant amount of land, natural forests that have taken millions of years to develop. These unique ecosystems are just being clear-cut to clear the way for mass production of agricultural goods, whether that be big palm oil plantations in the rainforest or giant animal agriculture operations. There is a significant amount of deforestation and destruction directly of natural ecosystems. Around 15 billion trees every year. It's a significant number. The world generates approximately 2.01 billion tons of municipal solid waste annually, with at least 33% of that being managed in an environmentally unsafe manner. So this is speaking to the amount of waste that we produce. As a collective society, as humanity, we generate approximately 2.01 billion tons of waste annually, and about a third of that is not managed in an environmentally safe manner. Over 80%, move this little thing out of the way, over 80% of wastewater is generated globally is discharged untreated into the environment, polluting rivers, lakes, and oceans. So of all the wastewater that is produced around the entire world, about 80% or over 80% is directly discharged into the environment, polluting rivers, lakes, and oceans. Air pollution is responsible for about 7 million deaths per year, with major pollutants including particulate matter, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide contributing to respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. So, as human beings, we depend on the natural ecosystems of the earth. We depend on these for food, for healthy water, for healthy air that we can breathe. And currently, these ecosystems are being destroyed at an alarming rate. Water is being polluted at an alarming rate, and the air is being polluted at an alarming rate. So all of these resources and elements that we depend on are being rapidly polluted and destroyed. About 9.2% of the world's population, or 689 million people, live in extreme poverty on less than $1.90 a day. An estimated 820 million people suffer from hunger globally, with food insecurity affecting even more due to conflicts, economic downturns, and climate change. The gap between the rich and poor is stark and continues to widen, with the richest 10% of the global population owning 76% of the world's wealth, while the poorest half owns just 2%. So I just want to make a note that as I'm going through these facts, I'm ultimately trying to just paint a picture of what's going on from different areas of society, some of the different problems that we're facing, to paint a collective picture. Now, obviously, I can't illustrate everything that's going on, but I'm hoping that through this, we can have some understanding of the situation that we're in. And if you want to look at any of these facts that are being presented here, I have the links to the resources that I got these from, the references, in the description below this video. So if you want to look into them more, you can do so there. So moving on, there have been over 150 wars in the last 100 years, resulting in over 231 million deaths. and this figure includes military and civilian casualties. In 2023, global military spending reached a record high of $2.44 trillion. To end world hunger, it is estimated that it would cost approximately $40 billion per year, and $40 billion is approximately 1.64% of $2.44 trillion. So, to end world hunger, it would only take 1.64% of the money that was spent on military spending just last year. So if they took less than 2% of the money they spent on fighting wars and investing in military defense, that money could directly put an end to world hunger. This really shows the poor allocation of our resources and what is being valued as society by governments, by collective. Really, to me, this is an alarming fact that 1.64% of the amount of military spending could go towards ending world hunger. So some other facts that I want to present here have to do with health and the epidemics that we face in our physical health and disease collectively. So cardiovascular diseases are the leading cause of death worldwide. If we look up statistics on what the primary cause of death around the world is, it is heart disease or cardiovascular diseases. In 2019, approximately 17.9 million people died from cardiovascular diseases, accounting for 32% of all global deaths. Of these, 85% were due to heart attacks and strokes. And these cardiovascular diseases are primarily caused by dietary and lifestyle factors. So again, to me, that just shows a way that we're not living harmoniously, where 32% of deaths are caused by heart disease, cardiovascular diseases that are primarily a direct result of the way that one is eating and living their life. So, to illustrate some of the mental health challenges that people are suffering from, today nearly 1 billion people worldwide are living with some form of mental disorder. That's 1 in 7 people, about. If we have around 7 to 8 billion people globally, and nearly 1 billion of them are suffering from some kind of mental disorder, that's pretty significant. And this includes a significant number of teenagers, with around 1 in 7 being affected. The most prevalent mental health issues that people suffer from include anxiety disorders and depression, which are the leading causes of mental health-related disabilities globally. So, before I go to that slide, to me, this is really showing the collective suffering that we are experiencing and the individual suffering that we are experiencing that's contributing to that. So if nearly 1 billion people are suffering mentally, they don't have peace, they don't have happiness, they don't feel fulfilled, they suffer from anxiety, from depression. If 33% of the deaths in 2019 were caused by heart disease, then that shows a significant amount of people are not living healthy lives. They're overeating, they're eating non-nutritious or toxic food, they're not living healthy lifestyles. So right there we can see physically and mentally a significant amount of people are suffering, and that is contributing to the suffering of humanity as a whole, where water is being polluted, earth, natural ecosystems are being destroyed, the air is being polluted, there are nations fighting in wars, people fighting against each other. There's so much suffering that is happening in the world, collectively and individually, and it's put us in a pretty drastic situation. So if we continue on this trend that we're currently following, if we don't change and we continue to follow this path collectively, this is what we're leading towards, where half of the species currently existing on the planet are in critical risk of extinction by the year 2100. So more than 1 in 4 species on Earth now face extinction, and that will rise to 50% by the end of the century unless urgent action is taken. Some of the most threatened species are amphibians, conifers, which are types of trees, coral reefs, sharks and rays, mammals, and birds. And within the next 15 to 40 years, it's likely that the following animals will become extinct: the polar bear, chimpanzee, elephant, snow leopard, tiger, mountain gorilla, orangutan, giant panda, rhino, and the koala. And unfortunately, these are just a few of many. So I know for me personally, these are all like iconic animals that I remember from childhood, seeing pictures of, reading stories about, and it's, to me, just incredibly sad that within the next 15 to 40 years, it's likely that these animals will become completely extinct, that they are the byproduct of millions or billions of years of evolution, and just from the actions that we as humans have made, primarily in the last 50 to 100 years, we are going to directly cause the extinction of these animals. So we find ourselves in a very unique situation right now. We are at a crossroads where we can either go towards a mass extinction event, which we're currently already facing. We can exacerbate that, make it even worse, and potentially lead even to our own extinction as a species. Or we can create heaven on earth. If we transform our way of relating to the earth, if we transform the way that we're currently living, if we individually and collectively change our actions to start honoring the earth, honoring living beings as a whole, and honoring our impact and our connection to the whole of nature, we can manifest a society, a world in which we are really reflecting that understanding of our unity with nature, acting in ways that honor our unity with nature, that defend nature, that are sustainable, that are ethical, that ultimately can produce heaven on earth, a place where we can live in true harmony with nature, with each other, have access to the abundance that nature provides. This is possible. It's a possibility, and it depends upon our actions as human beings, which depends upon our consciousness as human beings, because all of our actions reflect our minds, what we are thinking, how we perceive the world, how we perceive ourselves, and in relation to the world. All of our external actions and situations come from within ourselves on a mass scale. So this is the crossroads that we currently find ourselves in. And this opportunity in which we can start to reverse some of the damage, start to restore some of the ecosystems that we've destroyed, and start to preserve and increase the health of some of these species that are facing extinction, this opportunity that we have is not going to be here for a long time. We have a small window of time in which we need to collectively and individually decide which of these paths we want to follow. So the problems of the world are the result of human consciousness. The ecological destruction is really just people destroying the environment. The economic displacement is people impacting the economy. Social inequality is people mistreating groups and individuals. Political corruption is people abusing power and manipulating policy. Violence and hatred between people is people mistreating other people. War and conflict between nations are groups of people in power fighting with other groups of people in power. Disease and ill health are people not taking care of their health or knowing how to take care of their health. Stress and unhappiness is people feeling overwhelmed, stressed, and unable to function in our society. So all of these problems that we face collectively are directly tied to us as people. And they are the result of our behavior as people, our human behavior. And human behavior is a reflection of human consciousness. So the global crisis that we face is ultimately a crisis in consciousness. Consciousness in this context being how we perceive the world and our place in it, which directly leads to how we act in the world and relate with all life. And I think there's a really wonderful quote here by David Suzuki, that illustrates this. He says, if we regard a mountain as a deity rather than a pile of ore, a forest as a sacred grove rather than lumber and pulp, other species as our biological kin rather than resources, the planet as our mother and life giver and not an opportunity, then our actions will reflect far greater humility, respect, and responsibility. So right here, he's pointing to this fact that the way we act and relate with the world has to do with how we see it. So if we were to see a mountain as a deity, as many native people do, rather than as a pile of ore, something that has a bunch of resources in it that we can mine, then we will relate to that mountain entirely differently. We, as the native people do, we could honor the mountain, see it as sacred, make offerings to it, pray to it, give thanks to it for the pillar of life that it is. But because our society just sees it as a source of resources, as something that we can mine for different minerals or oil, we destroy this sacred being because we're not seeing it as sacred. We're not valuing it as that. That's not how we perceive mountains in this collective sense. And so we act in such a destructive way because we're just looking at what we can gain from it. We're just seeing it as a source of different resources. In the same way, if we see a forest as a sacred grove, as a beautiful ecosystem of life, then we'll have respect for it. We will tread through it carefully. We'll be considerate of this sacred grove, and we will wish to be of benefit to it, not to harm it. But if we just see it as a source of lumber and pulp, then of course we're not going to honor it, but rather we're going to destroy it to extract those resources for our personal gain. And this just illustrates really all of the actions that we have. The way that we relate to nature has to do with our worldview, our way of seeing nature and ourselves in relation to nature. So it all comes down to the way we see the world and the way that we see ourselves. And ultimately, what is underlying the problems, this crisis in consciousness, is that we have a consciousness of separation rather than one of unity. There is an illusion of separation, a delusion in which we feel ourselves to be separate from everything else. And is this not your experience? Is this not the common human experience that we all have? That we feel ourselves to be here, and we feel the world to be something out there that is apart from us. This is a natural human perception that we have, and it has a function. It has a necessary survival function for us to be able to distinguish ourselves from our environment, because that allows us to see what is a threat to us, to see what we need to gain as resources, as food, as water. There's a survival function to seeing ourselves as separate from things. But on a deeper, fundamental level, we are actually interconnected with everything. We could not exist if not for the intricate web of life and relationships that allow us to exist. This body, for example, that most of us feel to be who we are, this body cannot exist without the elements that sustain this body. And these elements are things that we often see as not self. We see them as separate from ourself. So food, for example, or water, air, the temperature and heat from the sun, all of these things are requirements for a human body to exist. So without these elements, there is no human body. So we cannot exist as we exist here now if not for all of these elements that sustain our existence. So ultimately, there is no separation between us on a deep level. Now, there is this surface level in which we can recognize some distinction between us, and that again serves a survival function, but it also can be a type of prison for us. It creates this illusion that we are separate from everything, and that illusion is the source of tremendous suffering, both individually, personally as well as collectively. So when we see ourselves as separate from the world and everything in it, this produces a feeling of loneliness on an existential level where we feel isolated from the whole and feel like we are disconnected from everything, that we don't feel that sense of connection with others or with nature. We feel like we are quite alone in the world. And this also creates fear. If we feel that we are separate from everything, then naturally we fear other things. We have this desire to protect ourselves from others. Fear creates defensiveness and violence towards others. When we fear something, if we don't understand something and we're afraid of it, there can be this natural reaction to just kill it or destroy it. I think this is perfectly represented for a lot of people when it comes to bugs and insects. If we see some insect or something we don't really understand, it looks creepy or freaky to us, we don't know if it's harmful or not, we may think it's safe and better to just kill it. So even right there on this, example of with an insect, we can see how fear, lack of understanding can just lead to violent action. And how much more so do we recognize this in the world between different people, between different groups of people? When we don't understand and we feel separate from and we have fear of, this can lead towards violence. Feeling separate, skipped a line. So fear also creates greed and the hoarding of resources. If I am afraid of suffering, of starving, of dying, of not surviving, if I have fear about the future, maybe I won't have access to resources, and I want to prevent that, then I will hoard resources so that I can ensure my safety. And this seems natural on one level, but the problem is we are now such a mass, have such a mass presence on the earth. There's nearly 8 billion humans. And with this many people, if all of us are just focused on our individual survival, and we are doing so at the expense of other people, other living beings, of nature, then we're having a huge impact. If collectively everyone is in this survival of the fittest, all for oneself kind of mindset, then that is at the expense of everything else, and that creates all of this damage, all of this destruction and chaos, because we don't see that fundamentally we actually depend on everyone and everything. And so if we are destroying the very things that we depend on, it's ultimately going to come back to us. And that's what we're now experiencing as a collective, is that we are evolving out of this animalistic survival mindset. There's obviously a place for it on a survival level, but we're at this very critical point where we need to transcend this animal survival focus on self and also start to include the whole of nature, the whole of the earth, as being a part of ourself, as being fundamental to the health of us personally. And unless we start to include others, include nature in our self-care, in our approach towards wellness, and we're only doing it for our own personal gain, we're only going to keep having these destructive actions. There's a wonderful quote by Gandhi where he says, "There is enough on the earth to provide for every man's need, but not every man's greed." And that's the problem that we face here. If all of the top earners, all of the wealthy people start hoarding resources because of their fear and greed, that's at the expense of all of the other people. Now people don't have enough access to these resources because there is such an imbalance economically. Feeling separate from others also causes us to overlook the suffering of others. If I feel myself as separate from another, then it's easy to look away from their suffering. It's easy to neglect it, and in a lot of cases, it's easy for people to directly cause suffering to other people and see it as their problem, as something that doesn't have any effect on oneself. Feeling separate from nature causes us to ignore the consequences of destroying nature. When we see nature as just something out there that has nothing to do with me and my survival. It's easy to overlook and to neglect nature and our impact on the natural world. So when we see ourselves as separate from nature, it's easy to pollute it, to dump our waste into it, not realizing we're inherently connected to nature, and if we're polluting and destroying nature, we're ultimately polluting and destroying ourselves, because we are nature. We are of the earth. We are a part of this natural world. We are not separate from it. But ultimately, this perception of separation, or this illusion of being separate, leads to this mentality of me against the world. And that is really one of the main diseases that we suffer from, individually and collectively, and it creates a lot of suffering individually and collectively when we are all thinking this mentality of me against the world. It's all about me and my benefit at the expense of others and of nature if it needs to be. That's sort of the mass collective mentality that so many people have, and it comes from a lot of different things, but a primary source of it is this mentality of survival of the fittest. It's pretty ingrained in our way of thinking culturally, socially, and as humans. And as I mentioned before, there is somewhat of a place for this when we were in such a survival mentality, but also it's even in that sense still coming from somewhat of an ignorant perspective, because there are plenty of indigenous cultures and native people that still relied directly on the natural world for their survival, and yet also had an understanding of their unity with everything, and therefore acted with compassion, respect, honor, and consideration of the whole and of their part in the whole. And our lack of doing that has, especially on such a mass scale, has produced so much of the destruction that we now see. So in contrast to this worldview of separation, when one has a understanding of our unity with everything, that we are an interconnected part of the whole, then we see ourselves as interconnected with the world and everything in it, and this produces a deep feeling of connection and belonging on an existential level. So instead of feeling like we are alone in the world and we're against the world, we feel connected to the world, like we are a part of it, and that we belong in this web of life, in this collective whole. It also produces love and the desire to be of benefit to the whole, to be of benefit to all life. When I can recognize my unity with everything, and I can recognize that my well-being depends on the well-being of everyone and everything else, and I can see myself in others, if I can see that other beings, whether it's a human being, animal being, insect being, they are all being. They are all living, aware, conscious beings that are having an experience of life just like I am. And if I can connect on that level and see myself and other beings, then naturally that awakens love, compassion, and kindness in the heart. So love creates kindness and compassion towards others. Love leads to the sharing of resources and care of others, as opposed to the hoarding of resources at the expense of others. Feeling one with others causes us to understand their suffering and gives us the desire to help alleviate it. Feeling one with nature causes us to value nature and take care of nature as a means of taking care of ourselves and of life in general. Ultimately, this perception of unity leads to the mentality of I am one with the world. So instead of me against the world, I and the world are one. It's an entirely different way of being, an entirely different way of seeing reality, and it leads to an entirely different way of behaving and acting, both in one's individual life as well as collectively. There's a really wonderful quote here by Albert Einstein that illustrates this very well. He says, "A human being is a part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. What a powerful, beautiful quote from an intelligent man. So a human being is a part of the whole, called by us universe, and he experiences himself as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison, this optical delusion, by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. So this is really the core problem that we face as a society, as individuals, is that we have this perception of separation where we actually see and feel ourselves to exist apart from nature, to exist apart from the whole. And from that, this illusion, from this misperception, this misunderstanding, we act in a way that is only trying to benefit this separate self and not recognizing that this self is not separate but depends upon everything else. And if we understood that, truly understood it on a deep, emotional, experiential level, then naturally we would have consideration of the whole in mind. We would have kindness towards other living beings. We would have compassion and love in our hearts for all of life, and that would cause us to respect life, to honor life, to act in a way that is not harming life. And really, that is what we need, individually and collectively, is to have this awareness and intention within ourselves to be of benefit to the whole and not to harm the whole. I mean, could you imagine how much would change if all of the corporations, if all of the governments of the world, if all of the media, all of the wealthy people, if everyone held within their hearts this desire to be of benefit to the whole, if they saw that they were connected to all of nature, that their actions had a direct impact on all of nature, and therefore on themselves, could you imagine what a world we would live in if everyone held this, especially those that have huge economic influence, if they understood our unity and desired to act in a way that benefited all? So many of the problems that we face could be alleviated in a very short amount of time. I mean, even when we looked at that statistic where just 1.4, I think it was at 1.48% of the total military spending could go towards ending world hunger, just like that, just 1.48% or 84%, less than 2% of military spending could end world hunger. And that's just one sector. Imagine if we started using more sustainable natural resources for energy, for food production, for housing, for clothing, for packaged goods, for all the means of production. If it all came from this intention to be of benefit to the whole, instead of focusing solely on one's personal gain. So, awakening from the illusion, waking up from the illusion of separation, means transforming our perception so that we realize our oneness with everything. When we recognize we are interconnected with the whole of life, our actions will stem from this understanding. When we realize we are one with nature and that our health depends on the health of nature, we will stop destroying and polluting nature and will naturally defend nature and be good stewards of the land. When we realize we are one with society and that our actions shape society, we will work towards building a just, compassionate, and inclusive community. We will foster cooperation, empathy, and respect, understanding that the well-being of each individual contributes to the collective well-being of all. When we realize we are one with other people, we will transcend the barriers that divide us and cultivate genuine connections that are based on mutual respect and understanding. We will see our reflections in others, recognize our shared humanity, and act with kindness and solidarity, knowing that our joys and sorrows are interconnected. When we realize we are one with the whole of existence, we will experience a profound spiritual connection that fills us with love and fulfillment. We will be free from the illusion of separateness and all the pain and fear that it causes. And we will experience deep peace in the realization of our true nature. This realization will inspire us to live harmoniously, honor the sanctity of all life, and contribute to a world where every creature can be respected. So hopefully you can see the true value of waking up, the true need for an awakening, collectively and individually, because there can be no collective awakening without us individually waking up. The collective society is made up of a bunch of individuals. So for this collective transformation to happen, there has to be individual transformation. The change that we wish to see in the world has to occur within ourselves on an individual level, because when that does occur, then we will change the way we act and behave in the world on a collective level. So as Chief Seattle said, humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. So, the challenge of awakening. If awakening is the solution to all of our problems, why have we not done it? Why is humanity not awake already? Why are so many people asleep and unconscious of the global situation, unconscious of our connection to nature, to the whole, unconscious of who we really are? The transformation of consciousness can only occur within oneself. So this is one of the great challenges of awakening, is that it depends upon the individual to take full responsibility for themselves, their mind, and their actions. It cannot be forced from the outside, but must unfold from within as one awakens new understanding and insight about the nature of reality. So, while the awakening of consciousness is the desperate need of our times, it cannot be forced on humanity, but must occur within the hearts and minds of human beings on a mass scale. As Dr. Wayne Dyer wrote, you get world peace through inner peace. If you've got a world full of peaceful people if you've got a world full of people who have inner peace, then you have a peaceful world. So it depends upon each one of us. It depends upon you, and it depends upon me. It depends upon each of us, truly. Awakening to our essential unity requires that we transcend the illusion of separation. This also means that we must see beyond the illusion of ourselves as a separate self or ego. And this is challenging because most people identify with the ego. We've identified with this idea of being a separate self our entire lives, and we believe this to be who we truly are. Most of us are unaware of our true nature, the aspect of our being that is deeper and more fundamental than the ego, this sense of being a separate self. As such, our entire worldview, our feelings of safety and security, our desires, our hopes and dreams, our motives, and everything that orients us and provides meaning in our lives is derived from the ego and our misperception that it is who we are. Ultimately, the core problem of the world is a spiritual problem. We do not know who we truly are, and so we do not act in harmony with our true nature. Spiritual awakening is waking up from the illusion of separation and realizing the truth of our being, which is inherently connected and one with all living beings. The true nature within me is the true nature within you, the true nature within all of life. So when we wake up to this true nature within us, we wake up to the truth of life as a whole. And from this awakened perspective, we can act in a way that reflects our understanding of oneness and our shared existence and consider the benefit of the whole, instead of focusing solely on ourselves and our individual well-being. Now, we are a part of the whole, so it's of course also important for us to take care of ourselves, but really it comes to the understanding of what is our self, what is the self that we take care of. And ultimately, the thing we're not understanding as humans is that our self is connected to everything. So ultimately, it's impossible for us to practice true self-care unless we also care for everything else, because the state of everything else has a direct effect on our own state of being. So, the reasons to wake up. Personally, waking up frees you from the illusion of separation, which is the root cause of loneliness, fear, hatred, violence, and ultimately all psychological suffering. As a result of freeing yourself from this illusion, you experience a deep sense of love and connection to life, an awareness of the beauty of life, contentment, gratitude, and fulfillment in each moment of being alive, kindness and compassion towards yourself and others, and ultimately peace and happiness. So one of the main reasons to wake up for ourselves is that it frees us from most, if not all, of our suffering. All of the unhappiness, all of the misery, all of the sadness, the loneliness, the fear, the anxiety, the depression, all of these mental states that so many of us suffer from, that 1 billion people at least suffer from, according to the statistic, has its roots in this misperception of our identity, in the state of consciousness, the level of understanding that we have. And if we can transform our perception, if we can wake up to our true nature, it frees us from this psychological prison, this psychological suffering that so many people experience. So all of the love that we seek, all of the joy, all of the happiness, all of the peace and contentment that we seek comes from waking up to the truth of who we are, because it's inherent in our true nature. But we don't have this awareness. We aren't connected to this truth within us, and so we suffer greatly as a result. Now, collectively, when you wake up and start living from this state of love, kindness, and consideration of the whole, it has a direct impact on the web of life. It helps to spread these qualities to others and supports a more conscious, loving, and considerate society. So I think many of us fail to understand the impact that we actually have. Human beings are incredibly social creatures, and we are influenced significantly by the energy of others in many ways, countless ways. Even just by looking at another person, we are influenced by the state of being of that person. If someone is looking sad and miserable, or they're frustrated and angry, and we see that, we have an immediate physical response to the state of being of another person. And that can, bring fear to us, or anger to us, or whatever our reaction is to the energy that we see in someone. But if someone is full of love and kindness and joy and happiness, and we see that person, then it influences us too. We start to feel safer and more relaxed and happy, and we're influenced by that energy. Energy really is contagious. So even just on that level, there is an immediate impact that one's inner state of being has on others. But also, as this whole lesson is talking about, our actions and our behavior comes from our state of being. So when someone is in a state of being of frustration, of anger, of sadness, of anxiety, all of their actions are coming from this place. And in the most core example here, if one's state of being is coming from this perception of separation, all of their actions are geared towards benefiting only themselves, and often at the expense of others, or with no consideration for others. It's all about self when someone has that perception of separation. On the other hand, when someone has this understanding of unity, there's a real genuine desire to be of benefit to others. We realize that our happiness is directly tied to the happiness of others. When you're happy, then I'm happy. When you suffer, then I suffer. So I want to help you not suffer. I want you to be happy because it makes me happy. And that's a reflection of this understanding of our connection, of our unity. So the way that we act in the world, the influence that we have on others, the choices that we make, and everything, it comes from our state of being, our level of consciousness. And we can start to see how this ripples out into the world. This is already happening. We're already sending out ripples into the world based on how we are internally. And that's happening on a collective scale. And that's very powerful. And think of even more so these really big organizations, corporations, governments, banks, all of these big organizations that have huge influence over the world, over society on this global scale. Imagine if all of the individuals in these organizations started to have a true love in their hearts and compassion and kindness and the desire to benefit the whole of humanity. How different our world would be. So these are the reasons to wake up. This is the reasons of why. This is the why of why we should really prioritize this personally and collectively. And the reason that I created this slide, the reason that I'm speaking to this right now, other than just to outline it and point out some of these reasons, is because I don't want to try to convince you that you need to wake up. I don't want to try to sell you on awakening. It's not the approach to have when it comes to waking up, because I can't make you follow your own journey of awakening. Only you can follow your own journey of transforming your consciousness, freeing yourself from this illusion of separation, and waking up to the truth of who you are. Now, I desperately, truly want that for you. I want that for all of us because I understand this. I want for humanity to wake up, and I am devoted personally to doing what I can to help this happen. And I would love for you to take this journey with me. It's the reason that I've created this course, this entire program, is to help guide you on a journey of waking up, to show you with tools, with teachings, with techniques, how you can see clearly this illusion of separation as it manifests in yourself, and then how you can also wake up to the truth of who you are to then transcend this illusion, to be free of this illusion, and to experience true freedom, true love, and true happiness within yourself. I want this for you, but you have to want it for yourself. And so I want to get this, I guess, out of the way in a sense, so that after this lesson, all of the lessons are something that you are personally desiring to learn from, and not something that I am trying to convince you of. So that's part of my reason for doing this, and my invitation for you is to really reflect on these reasons. And I guess this would lead into this next slide here. Do you want to wake up? You have to really ask yourself this question, because unless you actually, truly for yourself want to wake up, then there's no benefit to you taking this course or doing this program. There's no benefit to me sharing this information with you if you don't truly want to wake up. And so these are some of the reasons why I think we all should. But ultimately, you have to ask yourself this question for yourself, as you have to want to wake up and make the effort to do so. No one can force you to, and no one can do it for you. And of course, it's challenging to do so. It's challenging to transform our perception, to transform our patterns, our habits, these deeply ingrained beliefs that we have, but it is possible, and there are many tools and teachings that can help us do so. But it's not necessarily comfortable or easy. And I share this wonderful quote from Kaviji. He says, "Are you looking for comfort or transformation? For if comfort is what you search for, there will be no transformation. And if transformation is what you seek, you must sacrifice the idea of comfort." We all cling to our comfort zones, desperately cling to them. People will, unfortunately, be on the verge of death and would prefer to cling to their comfort zone than to change the habits and behaviors that have put them in such a state of ill health. Because in our comfort zone is where we derive our sense of safety from. It's where we feel comfortable, and human beings, myself included, can be pretty lazy. And we don't want to do what's challenging. We don't want to do what's uncomfortable. We don't want to do what puts us in a state of unknown and therefore feeling unsafe. And so to avoid that unknown, unsafe, feeling open and exposed, we will cling to the known. We will cling to what we feel safe with. We will cling to our comfort zone, and we will desperately cling to it to try to stay in that space. But our current comfort zone is one that is based on this illusion of separation. It's one that is, though we feel comfortable and safe in it because it's familiar, it also can be like a prison for us. It can be what is keeping us trapped, causing us to suffer, causing us to contribute to the suffering of others and to the world. And if we truly want to transform our perception, transform ourselves, and wake up, then we need to be willing to step outside of our comfort zone, to go beyond our idea of comfort, and to really open ourselves to the truth. And this can be uncomfortable. It's very helpful to have a sense of community on this journey, to have friends and guides and teachers and people that you can walk this path with. And that's really the whole intention behind me creating Conscious Collectives, to try to offer this community and this guidance and support for all of us that are on this journey, to connect us so that we can have more strength and do this together. But there's an element of it that inherently is individual. It's something that we individually, personally, have to desire, have to decide that we're going to do. And it really requires that we be willing to let go and go beyond our ideas of comfort to embrace change, to embrace transformation. And in order to do this, I feel we really need to have a strong intention, a strong reason why. And that's why I wanted to present this lesson in this way, is to really show the real need that we have collectively to wake up and individually to wake up. The suffering that we experience personally and as a society depends upon our awakening or our lack thereof. So as the Buddha said, no one saves us but ourselves. No one can and no one may. We ourselves must walk the path. So I want to touch on this as the final thing to touch on in this lesson, is this idea of bodhicitta. This is a Buddhist term, Mahayana Buddhist term to be specific, and in Mahayana Buddhism it is seen as the foundation of the path. So the word bodhicitta, bodhi is a Sanskrit word that means awake, and chitta is consciousness or mind. So an awakened consciousness is what the direct, or awakened mind is the direct translation of the word, but what it means in this context really is that bodhicitta refers to the altruistic intention to attain enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. It is the compassionate wish to free others from suffering and to help them achieve happiness and liberation. By awakening and freeing ourselves from our own suffering, we develop the love, compassion, and understanding necessary for making us capable of helping others to free themselves from their suffering. Thus, bodhicitta becomes the intention and inspiration to carry one through the difficulties of the journey ahead. So this journey of waking up is also commonly referred to as a journey of enlightenment, of waking up from the illusion of separation, being free of our suffering, and waking up to the truth of who we are, waking up to our inherent unity with everything, our oneness with all life, and acting from that place, acting with love and compassion. But this journey of transforming our psyche, of transforming our perception, our state of being, is a very arduous and challenging journey because it inherently involves us looking at and being with the parts of ourselves that we avoid, the parts of ourselves that we ignore, that we suppress, that we don't want to see. We have to look at and be intimate with our fear, with our anxiety, with our greed, with our ego, with our pride, with our arrogance, with our vanity, with our all of the inner mental, emotional states and all of the things that underlie them. We need to be aware of so that we can see them, understand them, and wake up beyond them to deeper and deeper aspects of our being. And while it is challenging to do so, it is also incredibly freeing, incredibly healing and transformative. And so this path of awakening is perhaps the most challenging human endeavor that we can take on, but also the most rewarding. It has the greatest promise, the promise of enlightenment, which is the freedom from all suffering and the awakening of love and our understanding of our true nature and our connection, our unity with everything. So if we have a very clear intention within ourselves of why we are wanting to wake up, why the path of waking up is important for us, and we can hold that vision and we can hold that intention, that can carry us through all of the difficulties that we may face, all of the discomfort that we may face on this journey. So you may have heard this before. It's common in business and entrepreneurship and things like that, or in even physical health and fitness. But if you have a strong enough why, the how, any how becomes possible. Something like that. I don't know the exact quote, but the idea is that if your why, if your reason is strong enough, it doesn't matter what the method involves for how to get there. But just having that strong intention carries you through. So that's why I wanted to speak to this idea of bodhicitta, which is the intention to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So if we can see the suffering of the world, if we see the suffering of all of the species that may become extinct, of all of the plant life that's being destroyed, of the oceans that are being polluted, of the people that are suffering from poverty, from disease, from lack of resources, from starvation, all of the suffering that we experience in the world, if we can see that and have empathy for that and have the actual desire to help change that, and we understand that all of these are caused from this consciousness level, or this consciousness of separation, then we can understand that in order to have true change and transformation, we need to transform our consciousness collectively, and that starts with us transforming it individually. So it all comes down to us, that we need to be the change that we wish to see in the world, that we need to transform our consciousness to be an example of an awakened being, to share and spread love and kindness and compassion and actions that are motivated by respect and consideration of the whole. It starts with us. And if we can really understand that and be willing to take this journey of transforming ourselves for the benefit of all, then we become capable of actually walking this path. We have to have a clear intention for why, and something that can carry us through in those challenging moments. And bodhicitta is, in Mahayana Buddhism, it is what that intention is. It's what the why is that carries us through. It's the foundation of the entire path. Why do we even want to wake up? Because doing so can help us to free other beings from their suffering. And if anything, it helps us to free us from our own suffering, which is a prerequisite for us being able to help others. If we suffer because of all of the suffering in the world, then we're not really helping the situation. We're just adding to the suffering. We're not really in a place that can take care of suffering. But when we learn how to take care of suffering in ourselves and to transform it, then we have the capacity, the capability to take care of the suffering of the world, to take care of the suffering of others, and to know how to transform it. So that's the real power and beauty of this path. But we have to walk that path first, then we can show others how to do it, and we can help them along their path. So with that, I want to share this bodhisattva prayer for all of humanity. So again, bodhisattva is another Sanskrit word. Bodhi means awakened, as we touched on with bodhicitta, and sattva means being. So bodhisattva is an awakened being, but in Mahayana Buddhism, it is someone that postpones dwelling in the bliss of enlightenment in order to devote themselves to helping wake up other beings. And this comes from this understanding of our unity and our connection. If we can recognize that we are inherently connected with everything, then we can't really be enlightened unless everyone is enlightened. And so a bodhisattva is someone that devotes their life to helping free the suffering of other beings. And they avoid just dwelling in total peace and enlightenment, as some paths focus on. They don't just stay in their own personal, private enlightenment, but they, from their awakened perspective, go out into the world and try to alleviate the suffering of others. So this is a bodhisattva prayer for all of humanity from Shantideva, who wrote the Way of the Bodhisattva. It's a classic Buddhist text. He says, "May I be a guard for those who need protection, a guide for those on the path, a boat, a raft, a bridge for those who wish to cross the flood. May I be a lamp in the darkness, a resting place for the weary, a healing medicine for all who are sick, a vase of plenty, a tree of miracles, and for the boundless multitudes of living beings, may I bring sustenance and awakening, enduring like the earth and sky, until all beings are freed from sorrow and all are awakened." It's a powerful prayer, and it reflects this intention of bodhicitta. So Shantideva is desiring to be a lamp in the darkness, a guard for those who need protection. And in order to be that, he knows that he needs to become that. He needs to transform the darkness within himself and bring light to himself so that he can be a light unto others. And the last thing I will share in this slide, or in this lesson, to wrap up this lesson, is the Bodhisattva vows. So I am personally very inspired by these vows. I think they're truly beautiful, because when we think about this idea of a bodhisattva and that they recognize the oneness of everyone and everything, and realize that in order for them, therefore, to truly be enlightened, all beings need to be enlightened. That seems like an impossible task. How can we wake up all beings? How can we wake up every single living being, not just human beings, but animal beings and insect beings? It seems infinite and impossible. And yet, this is what bodhisattvas vow to do. So these vows really speak to this, in the sense that it's like, this is an impossible task. No one could do it. I vow to do it. I devote myself to this mission, this impossible task. So the vows are: sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. The dharmas are boundless. I vow to master them. The Buddha way is unattainable. I vow to attain it. So basically, the path ahead, the ability to free all beings from suffering, it's impossible to do. And yet, I vow to do it anyway, because it is worthy of me devoting my life, my time, my energy to my own awakening for the benefit of all, and for my ability to use my body, to use the time that I have here to be a lamp onto others, to be a source of healing, of health, of inspiration, of love to others. Really, it comes from the heart. It comes from this heart's desire to be free and to help others be free of their suffering. And this, naturally arises in our hearts when we see others' suffering, when we can recognize that others suffer, when we are intimate with our own suffering, and therefore, again, recognize it in others. Naturally, this awakens in our heart. And not only is it for others, but it's for ourselves too, because we are one with everyone. And I know for myself personally, the greatest joy, happiness, and fulfillment that I have ever experienced has always come from when I've had an impact on another person. When I've done something to be of benefit to someone and I see that they're happy, that they feel more free, and they are expressing gratitude to me for it, there's nothing more fulfilling and heartwarming than that. So it's almost selfish in a way to want to be of benefit, but it's selfish in the right sense, and that our true self is the whole of everything. So I'm personally very inspired by the Bodhisattva idea, and I wanted to share it in this as well. But to summarize this lesson, we are in a serious situation right now. There is a lot of suffering that is happening in the planet. There's a lot of suffering going on between animal beings, plant beings, human beings. A lot of beings are experiencing great suffering and great pain. And this is caused primarily by the actions of humans on a mass scale. And our actions as humans reflect our consciousness. So the way that we are behaving is directly a result of how we see ourselves and how we see the world. And currently we see the world and ourselves as separate, or we see ourselves as separate from the world, from nature, from everyone. And this is causing us to act in a way that reflects that perception. But if we can wake up to the truth of our unity, and we can realize that we are fundamentally connected with everyone and everything, then our actions can come from that place. And this is what needs to happen on a collective level, but in order to do so, it has to happen on an individual level. And that's what this is really all about. That's what this whole program is about, is to guide you in this journey of awakening. And in doing so, to put you in the position to help to transform the world. Really, we need as many of us to wake up as we can, and as many bodhisattvas as there can be, as many awakened beings as there can be. The more of us there are, the more we can spread this love and this awareness of our understanding and act in a way that reflects this understanding, and real change can take place. If we want to transform the world, we need to start by transforming ourselves. So that's really the essence of what this is all about, and why I wanted to start with this lesson, presenting the global situation, its relationship to consciousness, and therefore that's the level on which change needs to happen, but it can only happen within us. No one can force you to change. No one can do it for you. You yourself must walk the path. But this program is designed to give you a roadmap, to show you how you can walk the path, and to make it really as easy as possible in terms of providing the structure and guidance of the path, but only you can take those steps. Only you can actually walk it. So, for example, if there is a hike, like a very long, challenging hike, and you see a very clear map on how to get to the destination, that map is invaluable. Without that map, it'll be very challenging to reach the destination. But just having that map doesn't mean that you're going to be brought to the destination. You have to actually walk there and take those steps. So I'm sure you understand the message I'm conveying here. So anyways, thanks for watching this lesson. I know it was a bit long, but I really hope that it conveyed the message that was being communicated here. And I hope that you can reflect on this and really understand the situation that we're in and understand your power to influence it, because our influence as human beings is immense, and even more so as we raise in consciousness. We have a more powerful effect on others as our consciousness raises. We tend to think of ourselves as separate in the world, separate from other people, kind of as we talked about here. But if anything, we're more like nodes in a network. So we're like a brain cell that's connected, or a nerve that's connected to all of these other nerves. So we have a huge web of relationships that we exist in. And when we start to transform ourselves, it has a huge effect on all of our relationships and ultimately the world as a whole, because we are not separate. We are connected with everything. So when we wake up, we help everyone wake up. And that is the intention behind this program and behind this mission. So I'm so thankful for you to be here on this mission with me and to be walking this path. Truly, I honor you for this. I respect you for this, and I thank you for this because it is what the world needs. So thank you for being here. Thank you for walking this path, and I look forward to continuing to share with you more information on how you can do this, how you can wake up, how you can transcend your suffering and this illusion of separation, and how you can realize your oneness with everything and the truth of who you are.